Welcome to another episode of Due Diligence. I'm here with my colleague Lee Taylor, once again live from our North Atlanta studios here near Chastain.
Good morning.
Hello, sir. How are you doing?
I'm usually your esteemed colleague.
Well, usually I have something for you. And I'm Jason Wieloch. Lee and I are both real estate experts at the Wieloch Group of Compass. Many of you know that. Many of you will know that. And we're here live again. And as always, we are real estate experts here in Atlanta, all things Atlanta. And we like to talk about the fun issues, real estate related issues mostly, but even tough issues. And listen, buddy, I think this is one of those weeks where it's appropriate because there's been a lot of protesting across the country. A lot of discriminations come to the forefront. And Lee, I've got a very special guest for us this morning.
Yes.
You know, NFL Hall of Famer great Tony Dungy.
Yes.
Well, his son Eric Dungy is a really great Compass agent and a good friend of ours here at the Wieloch Group down in Tampa. And he's going to come on and talk to us this morning about everything that's been going on.
Cool.
So I'm going to welcome him in here.
Awesome. I love technology.
I do love technology.
And Eric says he doesn't love technology.
Oh, he heard you say that. Eric. Good morning, buddy. What's going on?
Good morning. Oh, man, just another day in the life, man. How you guys doing?
We're good. We're good. We've been remarkably busy real estate-wise during quarantine the last couple of months. So Atlanta's a pretty robust market. How has Tampa handled everything? Because you're a top Compass agent down there.
Yeah, probably similar to you guys. Like the first couple of weeks of quarantine, I think everybody was just like completely stopped business-wise. And then the trickle down kind of came in. You got the first request to do like the FaceTime showing or the virtual tour. And like here we are maybe 6 weeks after that, where it's just like full speed ahead and probably in many ways, more intense than, typical because the market's kind of compressed now where you lost a few. So now it's just like double what you would expect like in the spring market. So it's been a lot.
Yeah.
That's a good word, compressed. It's exactly what it feels like. I feel like we're in a pressure situation and there's a lot more pressure to keep so many people moving through our life as real estate clients.
Yeah.
So Eric, tell everybody, all of our listeners, who you are. Give us a brief bio. We know you're a real estate expert in Tampa, but give us a 30-second elevator speech on who is Eric Dungy.
Cool. So yeah, I'm a former college athlete. Many people know my dad was also a former NFL coach. So I got into real estate about 4 years ago. Focus on working with athletes and coaches and entertainers, but also your everyday client. So I'm 28 years old here, living in Tampa, work for Compass, and that's kind of the short version of my story.
When did you get your real estate license?
I got it at age, I think I was 23 or 24. So I finished playing football. I had like one kind of internship with the Buccaneers actually for about 6 months, and then decided I don't like working for other people. So now then I got right into real estate. And it's actually funny, Chip Kelly, who was coaching the Eagles at the time, offered me a job with the Eagles while I was completing my real estate school. And my heart just said, you know what, like, it's weird to say this, like football will always be there, but I want to do this real estate thing now. I think
that's
the opposite.
Awesome.
But I was like, you know what, like I can probably like, get an entry-level job in the NFL as like a bottom, lower tier assistant, time.
It would be a coaching role or something like that is what you were kind of being placed in?
Like the coach's assistant almost, where you're breaking down film and you're kind of doing some groundwork and you kind of work your way up the ladder. And it was interesting and I was interested in it, but I was kind of like, I started the class. I want to see this through. If it doesn't work out, let's talk next season kind of deal.
Yeah.
Well, real estate certainly is a career for rebels.
Yeah.
And Atlanta, Tampa, we have a lot of connectivity, right? It's in the South, even though Florida is sort of its own thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people have moved between both cities, right? And so you've obviously, I think, spent some time here in Atlanta. Tell us about your experience in our great city.
Yeah, so it's just been interesting to see kind of things change. My sister is actually a Spelman alum. She is about 10 years older than me. So for the 4 years that she was there, I was, coming up and visiting every once in a while as like a preteen. come back through as an adult, kind of seen things change a little bit. So I've visited a few times here and there. I have a cousin who's a pilot, Delta pilot, so he was supposed to get married this spring, and I was planning a whole weekend in Atlanta this spring, but obviously that did not happen. But I will be in Atlanta again at some point.
Well, your sister was at Spelman during the Freaknik years. Were you ever around for Freaknik as a preteen, man?
I had a pretty early curfew back when I was like 11 years old. But it was ATL is actually my favorite movie of all time, and I'm not saying.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
I love the story. I love T.I.'s character and Lauren London's character in that movie. So as a child, I learned a lot from like that kind of the Atlanta culture, like the crunk culture and all that kind of stuff back in like the early 2000s, the Little John, the Ludacris, like that.
Yeah. Luda's our finest, really, truly, in my opinion. There's no finer rapper that's been, and there's Andre, but Luda, to me, is the rapper of Atlanta.
We got so many options here, man.
I'm talking, just going to call it out and say who it is. It's Luda. Chris, love it.
And get ethered on the comments section, but there are a lot of great Atlanta rappers for sure.
Yes, yes.
Well, one of the things about Atlanta that is really important this week, which is one of the main reasons we wanted to have you on, is we have a city that is very influential when it has come historically to civil rights.
Yep.
It is the most prominent and wealthy Black community in the United States as well. So there's a lot of influence that comes from that. Atlanta has sort of been the epicenter on so many occasions of social change, right?
Yeah.
In fact, what's our city motto, Lee? It's a city
Resurgence.
too busy
too busy to hate. And that's what Andrew Young claimed.
Yeah.
Our former mayor.
And I think in many ways, Atlanta has maintained that. We live together, multiculturally, I think, with a lot of unity compared to a lot of big cities. And so this past week, though, it's resurrected conversations that seemingly might be new in some people's minds, but they're really repeated, right? It's a lot of the same themes that have been recurring. And unfortunately, it has to do with police brutality, right? And abuse of power when it comes to law enforcement. And it's been really tough, I think, for everybody who is paying attention, and everyone should be paying attention, to watch the videos of things that have been happening. And George Floyd isn't the only example.
Right.
He's just the latest example, as I'm sure you know, Eric. And when we wanted to bring you on to really get your feel for what's happening, because you had told me earlier this week when we spoke, you are in the protests in Tampa. You're kind of on the ground. And a lot of times, you watch CNN, all the news stations, they're showing the bad apples and all this.
Well, they're showing tear gas and destruction because that makes good TV.
Yeah, they're showing the highlights that get people tuning in. But mostly this is a pretty peaceful process. So what are you seeing down there in your neck of the woods, man?
Yeah, I would say that, don't judge, these stories until you actually get down in it for yourself. As we know, the media likes to sensationalize things. That's their job. They got to get clicks and eyeballs. And the truth, usually isn't. There's a one end on the spectrum, say over here on this side. There's one end over here, the two extremes, and the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. So for me, I think Tuesday or Wednesday night, I don't even know what day it is anymore. I was out there. We marched from Kennedy Boulevard, which is kind of one of the main drags here in Tampa, down to the Fox News station. We marched downtown. I didn't have my little fitness tracker on, but I probably was marching like 10 miles all told. But it was all peaceful. We got our sign. We let our opinions be heard. But there wasn't really any violence. I have heard about other situations in Tampa that where there was not as much peace, maybe. But all my experiences have been peaceful. I think that's the majority of it. So I would just encourage people to kind of, if you're not sure, whatever, go check it out for yourself. Don't rely on the news, because how much can we really trust the media at this point?
Exactly.
To be real.
Well, how important is nonviolent protest in 2020? When, if you look at real change in America, some of it required violent protest. I mean, if Martin Luther King from the old Fourth Ward from Sweet Auburn had a house in the 60s, it was guarded by the deacons, and they guarded him. And they did it with guns. And they had guns on rooftops in the old Fourth Ward just to protect him, because there were people out to kill Martin Luther King. So, but he was an advocate for nonviolent protests. How do we keep that today when it seems like sometimes you have to be violent when anger comes up with what we saw with is it George Floyd?
George Floyd,
right. So, that's a big, you have to react with power. And how powerful is nonviolent protest today?
I mean, it's powerful, and I don't want to get this message misconstrued, but you also have to look at history, and you see a lot of changes from the results of conflicts, whether it was the Revolutionary War, the Civil War.
Right. Crispus Attucks, was the first killed in the black man, big black man. Big tough black man was the first guy killed in the Revolutionary War, right? God almighty.
Yeah. So
because somebody was scared. Somebody was scared.
Obviously, I'm not saying that we need to go and just start an all-out civil war, but at the same time, like the whole, I don't know, it's like to make the ruling, oppressive population feel you, they have to get uncomfortable. And so just, a totally silent, non-offensive, all that isn't going to rattle any feathers. So you kind of got to rattle some feathers. I feel bad for anybody who's lost a property or a business or a car or whatever it may be, but this is big, man. This is for this whole country, this whole world to like change finally. So like, there's going to be a couple, maybe a car that gets smashed or something like. I'm not advocating for it, but it's reality of what needs to happen.
What are the emotions that you've personally been experiencing this last week? I think a lot of times, as being a part of the majority, a white person in America, it's hard to share in that experience totally, right? And if any white person does think that, they're living under a rock. So tell us, like, how has this affected you on a personal level the last few days, positively or negatively?
Yeah, and I've really experienced a wide range of emotions. I'm a sociology major, so I've kind of been living in this world since I went to college. It's almost a decade now. And I got into a point probably with last year that I kind of just almost felt defeated and kind of gave up. You see, the first one that really hit me was Trayvon Martin. I think I was 20, 21 at the time. And for the last 7-8 years, you're thinking, all right, fill in the blank, this person's death has got to be the one that's going to stop it. And it hasn't. And so I got to the point where I stopped kind of speaking a little bit. I stopped watching stuff. I was kind of disengaged. I felt really hopeless. And this weekend this past weekend, I felt it was like my lowest point. And right when I did that, a pastor from a church in South Tampa, which is a affluent, predominantly white area in Tampa, asked me to speak on a panel. And it just gave me this hope that, like, don't quit. Like, you can go on this panel and speak, and you may change one life or 2 lives or whatever. And that, who knows what the effect of that is. So that kind of rejuvenated me. I protested. I spoke at the panel. Doing some things like this, like your podcast and a few others. So I've had the hopeless feeling. I've had the optimistic feeling. I'm also a little worn out trying to be a real estate agent and a friend and a brother and all this kind of stuff. But this is an important time. So I'm just trying to just forge on.
It's hard to do anything other than be a real estate agent full time.
No kidding. It's
when
a
you're fully
full-time
committed,
gig,
I mean, to do all the things you're doing and continuously sell houses. I mean, do you have any free time coming up?
No, I literally I don't even have time for conversations. It's crazy. And I appreciate, I have friends that will say, hey, I just want to know how you're doing right now. This is a crazy time. And I'm looking at my phone, this isn't a quick response. It's like an hour response.
Yeah.
If you want to know. So it's hey, can I call you in 4 days and we can talk for 30 minutes? That's how kind of this hectic things are right now. But, again, I'm super blessed to have, some business going on right now. I know a lot of people don't, so I don't want to take that lightly. And I think there's a responsibility to speak out when you have a platform. So I'm not going to hide from that.
What's happening in Tampa this weekend with protests and other action?
Yeah, I'm going to one on Saturday at 3 p.m. over in South Tampa as well. So I know there's that going on. There's a ton of different things. I'm losing track in some of the different organizations and rallies and stuff like that, but there's a lot going on. And I think I'm just really encouraged to see. What encourages me the most is that it's not just an all black protest. I was out there the other day and
cool.
Yeah, there was a lot of black people, but there was a lot of white people. There was some Asians and some Hispanics. There was, gay people. There were straight people. There was transgender people. It was we're all in this thing together. And that was really encouraging and uplifting to know that.
It's
It's
interesting.
for everyone. Sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's interesting you mentioned that. I was reading an opinion piece in the Atlanta Journal this morning about how it was comparing the protests from 92, Rodney King, to now, and how in 92, it was essentially drawn on racial lines, right? It was all Black protesting. And 30 years later, you do want to talk about positive progress. Well, the obvious positive progress is it is way more mixed now. There is way more participation in these protests as a whole
That's
across the
consciousness. That's
society,
just a broader
right?
consciousness.
And but that doesn't mean that we're anywhere near the finish line. One of the things
Right.
that Lee and I were talking about is how a lot of things with discrimination, racism, it's not as overt and outward as maybe 40, 50 years ago, right? It's not the obvious verbal confrontation and segregation per se, but a lot of it is institutionalized, sort of below the surface. It's overt in many respects, right? So, what is it that we as a society need to understand and know to really improve and get better going forward, that many of us, uh, white people, people that are not of color should know and should understand at a higher level?
Yeah, I think the first is that it's like deeper. It's a systemic issue, and it's even your favorite sports team saying they're going to donate $1 million to the local whatever charity. Like that's great. Like for sure, that's great. But like also, what are they doing about their hiring practices? What are they doing
Right.
about like are they taking advantage of low wage employees? Like look at Uber for example. I read an article last night about them. I Uber everywhere, so like I guess I'm guilty of like feeding into it. But I think they made a donation and made a statement out, which was great. But then it's like they also are spending like over $100 million to trying to like change the laws in California to pay their drivers with below minimum wage, and the majority of their drivers are minorities. So it's like, yeah, it's great that they sent the thoughts and prayers and they sent us
Right.
whatever. Like, let's like take a deeper look at these companies and for what they really are, and the ones that you don't believe and don't support, like like don't give them your business. Like your dollars in your pockets speak loudly. So I always encourage people just to read and kind of get out of their maybe just their perceived notions of what's going on and take a deeper look, whether that's books, whether that's documentaries, whether that's articles. There's so much information now. That's the beautiful thing. Maybe back in different eras, you really couldn't get access to this information, but now with the internet and social media and all this stuff and Netflix, you can get access to anything like almost instantly. So just take your time, especially now if you're quarantined, you're stuck in your house, like read a book. Just Mercy is a great one. When They See Us is a great one.
When They See Us.
Is a great one. White Fragility. So those are a few just books you can read and have conversations amongst your coworkers or your family members. And so read, talk, and speak.
I think TV news is bullshit. And I think that's the first thing that people need to turn off. And I think you're right. The only real way to get news at a high level and to educate ourselves in 2020 is by reading and taking the time to go out and find higher level information.
Well,
and
listening is the biggest,
Yeah.
even more than reading, and is listening to the voices of people who speak. And, you mentioned T.I., right? Did you see T.I. and Killer Mike and Keisha Lance Bottoms and all that? Did you see that press conference on Friday or Saturday?
I did. Yeah, I didn't see T.I.'s.
That was killer. I mean, those guys just spoke from where everybody needed to hear exactly what they said.
And Lee, to your point, I think a big thing. This is a message that I kind of said at the church panel I spoke at is when you're speaking to other people, which is great, listen with the intent to understand and not to respond. I think a lot of times, Black, white, whoever you are, you're like, all right, I'm going to get my Stephen A. Smith on and get my rebuttal ready. It's a debate. We're going back and forth, but like, this doesn't need to be a debate. Like, this can just be like, hey, I'm just going to listen and take it all in, digest everything you said. Maybe I'll have a question for you, or maybe I'll use some follow up. But like, you don't have to always like have to have your perfect response ready. We're not getting points for debating right now. This is more informing and opening your mind, opening your heart.
I just want to strangle Stephen A. Smith whenever I see him. We are a real estate podcast, and I think that it's important that we always relate it back to what we do, issues like this. And we have, a strong responsibility as real estate professionals because we help provide housing to people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of that calling is to do it in a fair and non-discriminatory way. The foundation of that is fair housing.
It's the law.
It's the law, but it's also part of our, code of ethics as realtors as well, to reinforce that. And so I think we have been fortunate on our team to have a very diverse client base. When I look at our closings, it's very multicultural,
Mm-hmm.
And that's great, especially because we do a lot of in-town business.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's always an opportunity to get better. And Eric, I'm curious, what have been your experiences related to fair housing? What things have you seen, even in 2020, that could borderline be unprofessional, unethical with regards to fair housing, as well as your own personal experience buying or selling real estate? If you've experienced things that maybe we don't even notice about our business that we could improve.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had I know the history of redlining and blockbusting and all those things. I've been fortunate to not necessarily experience those in my short time in real estate. But my first year in real estate, I took a client to a house. Client looked a lot like me. We're both similar age. We walked in the house. It was a for sale by owner, and the lady asked for identification, asked to see my license, all this, well, I guess I didn't look like a realtor. And so that was very uncomfortable. And then she followed us through the house the whole time we did the showing, and then asked if we were going to put an offer. And I'm like, no, you made us very uncomfortable. We don't want to live here. That was one experience I've had. And then I also wanted to say that, just even my own bias. I mean, one of the hardest things is just when a client's like, hey, we're new to town. What are the good areas? And even me, you tend to show them the white areas as the good areas. And, and you're not saying that overtly, but you're like, oh yeah, maybe South Tampa, you like that. Or maybe, up in the northern suburbs, but
you're steering, dude, you're steering.
Yeah. It's an unconscious bias, but it's, you gotta, now that I recognize it, you gotta all right, you can't do that. You gotta, it's tough. And it's hard to change your unconscious thoughts, but I think that's,
even Eric Dungy can steer.
I hope I didn't snitch on myself and get my license revoked.
if I put your two ages together, I'm about your two ages put together. Okay. So this is about history, guys. If you want to talk, about neighborhoods, I love talking about neighborhood history because I can tell history. And that's where I relate. That's how I get out of any situation where I feel like I'm crossing some sort of ethical border, talking about black and white. But history tells that story. I don't have to tell it.
Well, and Lee, actually, Eric, we should take some time off the podcast, maybe the next retreat with Compass. Lee can come along. You know a lot about the history of Atlanta and blockbusting and how lines were drawn. And a lot of that stuff is history. And I think you really hit on it, Eric, which is today it's a lot of things that are sort of ambiguous at times, right? And steering is probably the one that we inadvertently, as a profession, probably are guilty of on some level. Like you said, sometimes we're not even intending to do it, and you meet a client, do you consciously or subconsciously say, oh, you're going to love this neighborhood, or you know what I mean? And you didn't even have bad intentions, right? But I think that goes back to the same conversation as schools, right? So a lot of times I see realtors say, oh, well, this is a good school, this is a bad school. And it's like, who are you to draw those conclusions, right?
Yeah.
Just who's to decide what's a good neighborhood or a bad neighborhood? And I think we as a profession have to be really focused on not labeling anything contextually.
Very good point. Very good point, Jason.
Are we using just our own little thoughts when we say that neighborhoods are good or bad? Are we looking at resale values and crime statistics and walkability? Are we just saying, oh, there's a black high school in that neighborhood, so we'll watch out? So we have to really, are we speaking with facts, or are we speaking with opinions?
100%. I even had a couple recently that ended up working with us, and they had mentioned the last realtor kept making comments about schools that they were actually interested in.
Wow.
And they didn't see a problem. And the realtor's like, well, this isn't like a great school district. Well, what is that?
When did
Who
you
are
become the arbiter?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not necessarily directly related to race, but it can cross over in so many ways. How we label things and place our opinion, then all of a sudden we're steering people,
right,
in some respect. So I just think it's interesting because I personally, I've bought and sold my own place a couple times. I haven't personally experienced something like that, but I do appreciate that you mentioned that you actually went on a home tour and somebody followed you around and you're a realtor. That's just crazy.
yeah.
It was.
Do you know who you're talking to?
Right. And like, that's an interesting thing I get sometimes is, I've never obviously been beaten up or shot or anything dramatic like that, but every once in a while you kind of get a certain attitude or a certain kind of that. And then it flips really like dramatically when it's like, oh my gosh, your dad's my favorite coach. And it's like, wait a second. When I was just a black guy with dreadlocks, you felt some way, but when I was Tony Dungy's son, you felt another. And yeah.
That's so critical for you, man. I mean, come on. You can't draw the line any clearer than that. And that's where that unconscious shit comes up, Jason. That's the stuff that people don't see or think, but just because they know that now he's got a dad who was a Super Bowl winner, makes him different instead of a dude with dreadlocks that has a sociology degree.
Well, speaking of different, I think our CEO is a pretty impactful character.
Damn right.
Robert cool. Revkin, one of the coolest dudes in the real estate business. And historically, we're a business that is in many ways not diverse. You look at individual teams, you look at companies, you look at leadership, right? And there's a lot of opportunity for our industry to become more inclusive and more diverse. I think Compass has done as good a job of any at promoting that. You look at the staff at our brokerage.
As a modern company.
It's the most diverse staff of any real estate brokerage I've ever been in. And then we've got a CEO, Robert Revkin, who is just outwardly talking about this stuff week to week. Eric, I don't know, what have your observations been of Robert? Because I've been super impressed about his leadership.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, just the diversity. Just on my team alone, we have 3 or 4 black people, a couple of Cuban people, and like 1 or 2 white people, and like a team of 10. Like that's
1
awesome.
or 2.
Well, honestly, I don't like,
because one of them might be gone by the end of the day. Sorry, man. I just thought that was a funny comment.
No, man, I appreciate it. But no, yeah. So we have a diverse team, and that kind of reflects like a lot of the teams that I see. And then Robert, just like, I don't know how many African American CEOs there are of like giant real estate brokerages. I can't imagine there's too many.
There are none.
Like, he's the only.
Yeah,
I think.
Probably literally none besides him. So to hear him come and like send out the emails weekly and post and go on the news and talk and pass it, and kind of he set the tone for the whole organization, the whole company of like, hey, this is how it's going to be. And it's not just black issues. I mean, when there was issues affecting people for sexual orientation or for for women or whoever it may be, he was speaking about those things as well. And so that just shows you the leadership you have. And I couldn't be more honored to work for a company than any other company in the US.
It's about, he has this deep well of empathy for who we are as entrepreneurs and how we don't, you just said it earlier, you didn't want to be in somebody's corporate structure 5 years ago and you found real estate. Robert has this deep level of respect for us for that. And that's cool because he loves his mother deeply, cares about her deeply, and he has created something that nobody else has ever created for their mother. I mean, that's another way to think about it,
Well, Eric, I know you don't have much time left. So I'm going to end with sort of a fun question because, everyone's been asking me in quarantine, what have you been up to? And after a while I look at them and I go, same thing as you, man. So here's a better one. What trip did you have to cancel this year? Because we've all canceled something that we were planning.
I've had a couple of different things and weddings, stuff like that, but I'll tell you the trip that I really had that I was most looking forward to. I'm a casual, maybe above average soccer fan. So I had me and my best friend to go to the Euros this summer.
Oh man!
4 games in 4 different countries, and then also spend a week in Africa. So a week in Europe, a week in Africa.
That sucks, man.
And basically like right now at the time. And not to brag, I had, connected with somebody that was in the organization, UEFA, and was going to, help with some pretty good tickets and stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's all gone.
Oh.
Man, I feel for you, man. I feel for you. That's a pretty epic trip. I love soccer as well. Atlanta United, don't know if you've heard of them. Probably the most popular MLS team in America. And we averaged, what we did before March, over 50,000 people per game for an American soccer team. So we've got season tickets, our team does. You're going to have to come up and attend a soccer game.
Yeah, come up.
I would love to. I love just the atmosphere of soccer with like the torches and all that stuff. The what do you call those things though? The flares and all that stuff, and the smoke and everything.
We have cannons. We have cannons. If we pick a good day, T.I. will sing the national anthem, and then we'll take you to Buckhead Seafood.
Hey, now we're talking. That's
yes, sir.
Eric's going to get his mask and jump on a plane.
I'll really do it.
Hey, man, I know that you had a hard stop at 30 minutes. You got another call. You're a busy guy. Listen, we appreciate you. I've definitely appreciated getting to know you since I joined Compass. It's been another really great benefit to being a part of this company is some of the brightest and upcoming stars. And you, man, you're down there in Tampa killing it. And if anyone that we know here in Atlanta across the country that's listening, they need an agent in Tampa, they need to call Eric Dungy. So Eric, what's the best way to reach you if somebody needs a Tampa agent?
You can go, I'm going to give you guys my phone number right now.
All right.
Hit it.
Oh, man, 813-442-1116. Please don't spam me, but if you really want to buy a house, sell a house, give me a call.
Yeah,
or
don't spam this guy.
442-1116.
All right, man. I know you got to jump. Thank you for coming on, and I know I'll see you again soon when all of this sheltering in place is over, all right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I know we're trying to get another kind of Compass retreat or maybe a mini retreat with some of our buddies. So I'd love to do that. Hopefully it's safe soon and we can get that going.
Let's do it. Go sell something.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Awesome. You guys have a great one.
Thanks. See you, man. All right. Take care.
All righty.
Wow. Great interview,
awesome.
Lee. We're still on the air.
Well, hey.
I never ended the podcast.
All right, let's keep talking, dude.
Well, folks, we've been talking about a lot of different subjects here in quarantine, and it's not always been totally real estate related, but I think that this topic really does speak to us in our profession. George Floyd, this whole thing the last week has been about police brutality and protesting and such. But there is an opportunity for that to carry over into how we do our business and continue to be conscious about how we go about the home buying and selling process for people, because let's face it, we're here to serve.
We are. And, it's powerful that we can meet folks like Eric to just, like I said, it's about listening, and sales is listening, and we'll be more successful, Jason, in the long run by listening really intently to what's going on. Marvin Gaye wrote a song about it in 1972 about riots and destruction and, all kinds of murder and negativity that was happening back then. And it's still happening under the same basic circumstances, which are about oppression of Black folks and oppression of poor folks. And we all have to have a little bit more empathy and a lot more listening to make this a better world.
Well, we at the Wieloch Group folks are, and here on Due Diligence, are committed to equality, committed to serving everybody equally. So come one, come all, because we're going to have a really great second half of the year. We're going to become more real estate intensively focused as we come out of quarantine, because there's going to be a lot of information that you guys are going to want to know and need with regards to real estate. And we expect there to be a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of momentum going into the second half of the year. At least that's what the experts are saying.
Well,
we're not always right.
This expert is right.
But
it's happening.
It's happening. And in the meantime, again, I'm Jason Wieloch. This is Lee Taylor of the Wieloch Group of Compass.
This is Lee Taylor.
And we're real estate experts here in Atlanta. And if you need services, not only here, but across the country, in any market, we have that at the best professionals. We can help you find another me, another one of us, wherever you are and listening. And so until next time on Due Diligence, we'll catch you then.
See you, man.